Welcome into the Ravens Brawl podcast. It is episode 15. I think I say that with a question mark because I think we talked about it. I think it's 15. They keep letting us on here each week, so that's pretty good. I'm your host, Joe Schiller here with my co-host, Dave Steinwettle. We took a week off last week for a little rejuvenation, and then we're back. So, Dave, what's going on, man?
Hey, look, you might have rejuvenated. I just ended up getting sick, so I don't know what it is, but I'm ready to talk some Ravens free agency. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, free agency is right around the corner, just about over a month away, starting in March. But there's a lot to talk about right now. We thought it'd be best to break it up into position groups based on kind of what the Ravens are going to be pursuing and looking to upgrade going towards the off season. So today is outside linebackers, which has been a pretty big topic of conversation around the team over the past couple of years, and especially this year going into the offseason because the Ravens have a lot of decisions to make. We'll prefacing it with exactly what they're working with going into the offseason. Last year, they let Zadarius Smith go. They let Terrell Suggs go. They had Matthew Judon, who had a breakout season, had 9.5 sacks for the team this year. He is a pending unrestricted free agent, and the Ravens have some decisions to make. The most common route the Ravens could probably go with this is the franchise tag with Matthew Judon, which seems like the most likely route right now. But there are some plays they can make off of that. But either way, Matthew Judon or not on this team, outside linebacker is a huge position of need. So we kind of want to tackle some of the impending free agents that could be on the market that the Ravens could hit. So, Dave, what are some of those guys that you are looking for or looking at on the market that the Ravens could be targeting? Because we've seen how good some teams can be with some of these top tier pass rushers, and there are some very interesting names hitting the open market. Who's your guy? Like, who are you looking at right now?
Well, my guy is Yannick Ngakoue, the free agent for the Jacksonville Jaguars, outside linebacker, University of Maryland product. However, Joe, I don't think he hits the open market. I think he's one of those guys, like maybe Matt Judon, that is going to draw the franchise tag from the Jacksonville Jaguars because they feel like they got to keep somebody. Uh, in all honesty, though, as the camera issues are good, but audio wise, we're fine. I like, honestly, Bud Dupree. And Joe, we know him very well from the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he was a guy the Ravens were semi interested in the in the draft the year that he was available. So I kind of think that there's a possibility if he comes at a reasonable price that he is probably the guy that might fit best with what the Ravens want to do. Big guy, really good at setting the edge, a big part of TJ Watt in being able to set that edge and be a part of the run game, and also being able to deliver some good pressure. I think that he's the guy right now looking at it that I think Joe might be the best fit for the Ravens.
His position is so interesting because the free agent market is so inflated when it comes to pass rushers. I mean, we saw Zadarius Smith get so much money last year, and to his credit, had a great season because of it. But just looking at Spot Rack's calculated market value for Bud Dupree is they're projecting him to receive a 5-year, $83 million contract, which would average out at $16.6 million per year. Just for reference for that, that is more than annually than Zadarius Smith made last year, which is pretty crazy to think. But Bud Dupree is only going to be he is still pretty young. He's only 27 years old and a former first-round pick, so definitely a lot of potential there. I look at it with the Ravens situation as Yannick Ngakoue being a dream scenario, like you said, but it's one of those things where the Jaguars aren't going to let him go. The Ravens aren't the only team here that a pass rusher is a big area of need, and a lot of these teams that have impending free agent pass rushers, you're not going to let them go because it's so hard to find elite talent at the position. The Ravens know that. They've had their fair share of pass rushers throughout the year, and they've had a tendency to let them hit the open market. And last year, they were able to combat that with a lot of their defensive scheme with Wink Martindale in that secondary. But if you don't have Matthew Judon on your team, it's going to be pretty tough. But Yannick Ngakoue, to me, is definitely the guy that I look at as your dream scenario. I mean, a Maryland guy coming back to the area to play for the Ravens would be awesome, but he is going to get he's going to get the top tier money if he does hit the free agent market. And we know the Ravens don't necessarily have the cap space to be bidding with teams for his services. So it comes down to, hey, is this a fit for us? And And what happens with Matthew Judon is going to determine exactly what the Ravens do here. A guy that I look at that is not I guess, a free agent right now, but is a guy who could become a free agent or via trade is Ryan Kerrigan from the Redskins. We've talked about him before. He is a guy who was mentioned to the Ravens last year in potential trade talks, but Dan Snyder did not move him, did not move Trent Williams or any of those guys. You just wonder if a guy like that would come to the Ravens or if the Redskins would be willing to deal him there. Ryan Kerrigan has been a very underrated pass rusher. He is north of 30 now, older, but a very productive guy over the course of his career. If you look at the kind of the top guys, if you look at the sack leaders from like 2012, 2013 and on, he's up there with the best of them. If you look, he's probably third or fourth there. I'd have to actually look at the numbers to see where he ranks. But he is a very underrated guy that I think would contribute well to this Ravens defense and probably would fit better their cap space and their market. It would be a good fit in Wake Martindale's defense, and a guy who can and has a proven track record of getting to the passer or getting to the quarterback, and a veteran guy that would fit right in there. And we have to look exactly what the Ravens are working with outside of Matthew Judon, which is not a lot, to be completely honest. You have Tyus Bowser and Jalen Ferguson, who have, Jalen Ferguson is heading into his second year. Tyus Bowser heading into the final year of his rookie contract as a former second-round pick that has not lived up to the billing. And we kind of talked about this a little bit a couple weeks ago about how the Ravens have had some underperforming pass rushers. The jury's still out on Ferguson. There's a lot to be left with him. He did, I think, come on later in the season as he got more of an opportunity. Another guy I could look at that I think would be interesting about bringing back is Pernell McPhee, a guy who got hurt halfway through the season. You could get him back on a very team-friendly deal. It just, for him, he's suffered so many injuries to this point in his career. I wonder if he still wants to play. But the fit's there. He's a former Raven. He's been in the locker. He'd be a great locker room presence. So I think you're kind of looking around those kind of options. Everyone loves to gawk over the huge free agents, but the Ravens just are, first of all, not a team that's been huge on making big splashes. We saw it last year with Earl Thomas, but they typically do not make big splashes in free agency. And this would make more sense to me, but it all depends on what they do with Matthew Judon. That's step number one, and then the dominoes fall from there.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you said, I think Pernell McPhee is a safe bet to return for the Ravens because you can get him on a one-year deal. Kind of like what you signed him for last year. A guy I look at as another potential option, Joe, I like him. Marcus Golden, kind of an underrated name. He's had double-digit sacks 2 of the last 3 years. He was with the Giants last year. Average salary about $13.5 according to SpotTrack.com. Isn't outrageous. He would be a couple $1 million cheaper than Matt Judon, but I think you can get the sort of production out of Marcus Golden that you would out of Matt Judon. Because let's be totally honest, Matt Judon only had 9.5 sacks, I believe, last year, which was a career high, but Marcus Golden has averaged double digits 2 of the last 3 years. Last year with the Giants, which was a really bad defense, he got 8.5 sacks. Imagine what he could do in Baltimore. He's going to be cheaper. He's not a top-tier guy. And I think that's the big thing is when you talk about free agents, if the Ravens are going to go after a guy, it usually is in that second tier that they go. And Marcus Golden isn't a flashy name. He isn't Shaquille Barrett. He isn't Ngakoue or Clowney or even who did I say? Dante Fowler. Throw those guys out there. He's not in that category, but he's that second tier of durable, dependable pass rusher that's going to be about $5 to $10 million cheaper than those top guys. He's a guy I could very easily see that is Bud Dupree, just lesser known. And I have a personal connection with him. So I'm rooting for Marcus Golden. But
you could be in these negotiations here for help Eric DeCosta out for these.
I know. But to me, he's a perfect fit at a little lower dollar per dollar value than, say, one of the top tier pass rushers.
Yeah, another guy I look at that I don't know if I necessarily agree would be a good fit with the Ravens, but a guy that maybe touches that second tier would be Vic Beasley. He's a very interesting guy because he had really kind of a roller coaster career with the Falcons. He had 15.5 sacks in his second year with the Falcons. And then any other season, he had 4 in his rookie season, 5 in his third season. 5 in his fourth season and 8 last year on his fifth-year option with the Falcons. Very up and down career, but a guy that the Ravens could potentially target for a lesser, maybe a cheaper contract compared to those top guys. Because listen, that'd be great to have Jadeveon Clowney on the Ravens, but he's going to set the market for the outside linebacker group, and that just doesn't make sense for the Ravens with all of the positions of need that they have right now, especially on the defensive side of the ball. We haven't even touched what they could do at interior defensive line, inside linebacker. The secondary is pretty much set with what they've done already this offseason, but there are a lot of moves for the Ravens to make, and I just don't see them investing in a huge contract for one of those guys. It just wouldn't make sense to me, in that it's not the track record that Ozzie Newsome had and that Eric DeCosta, who was essentially his predecessor, who spent all the time with him and took over, has done either. They've been big on re-signing their own guys. They've done a lot of work getting those guys extended before they've hit free agency, and if you take a look at all the guys who could have been potential free agents this year, Eric DeCosta was able to lock some of those guys down before they even hit the market. I think the big thing is getting those guys and not going towards a guy that's going to set the market, because teams throw around so much cash in free agency, and the best teams aren't the ones making huge splurges. You're going to make, I mean, if your teams do make big moves and that help out, but if you're the team that's spending the most money in free agency, odds are you're not going to be the most competitive. That's just what we've seen throughout history, and those teams with a lot of cap space have let go a lot of players, and free agency is a revolving door. So, I mean, in your opinion, like I said, none of this falls out without Matthew Judon. Do you believe that any of these options would be better than Matthew Judon currently in Baltimore next season? If you were to look at it and say, I could have any of these guys over Matthew Judon for probably the similar price, do you take one of them?
I would, if I can get him on a lesser deal, because let's be totally honest, Matt Judon at times in his career in Baltimore has disappeared in games. He was a non-factor against Tennessee. There were other games where the Ravens needed to get a pass rush, and he didn't get it. Now, I know that people will say, well, he was our best pass rusher, so he got double-teamed and he got triple-teamed. Well, in my opinion, Joe, if you're going to make 15, 16, 17, $18 million a year, like he is expected to on the free agent market, you need to be a difference maker no matter what you face. Go look at what Zadarius Smith was able to do. When everybody knew that he was really the top option in Green Bay, he still was a force. I didn't see that out of Matt Judon enough to where I have the confidence to say, okay, if we let Matt Judon go, we're going to be hurting. I think you can get that sort of you can replicate what he did and not have to break the bank for it. And I like Matt Judon. I'll be very happy if he stays, but much like CJ Mosley, there's a price cap. There's a cap to how much I will pay you for what you do. And for Matt Judon, 9.5 sacks, games where he disappeared, if I can get a second-tier pass rusher at 10 to 12 million as opposed to 15 to 18 that you'd have to pay Matt Judon, and I know I can get at least 9.5 sacks out of him, I'm going to take it. That's just me. What about you?
Oh, I feel like we talked about this last year with Zadarius Smith, where he was going to make a lot of money on the open market, and we were curious to see exactly how he was going to perform getting a big contract. I think there was no question we knew he was going to get a big contract, but how he performed. And when he went to Green Bay, he was undoubtedly, I mean, you put him in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation last year. He was that good. He really was as a pass rusher for the Packers last year. I'm just tired of seeing a revolving door around the pass rush. I think so many times the Ravens have let these big pass rushers go. And I was an advocate to keep Smith last year. I thought he brought a lot of value to the defense. Obviously, you can't defend how much he's going to make in the open market, and the Ravens just typically aren't a team. Like we said, they're usually pretty cash strapped, so they don't have a lot to be one of those teams bidding huge money. But I like to see Matthew Judon stay, and I think the Ravens are in a better position to keep him with a franchise tag. At least you keep him on a one-year deal for around $15, $16 million, and then potentially try to work out a contract extension. Gives you a little bit of wiggle room. If not, you could potentially look at a tag and trade down the road. But there's just so much questions around the depth behind Matthew Judon that I just struggle with really any confidence of moving on from him right now, because the Ravens had him as their backup behind Zadarius Smith and Terrell Suggs last year, that you knew that you had this ascending guy who was going to be stepping up for him. But if you look at their roster right now, I just don't see it. And for a guy that is very athletic, has the ability to play kind of around the defense. Wink Martindale gets pretty creative. We've seen a lot of different packages and stuff where Matthew Judon has been used in and been utilized, and I think he just brings a lot to the defense that, to me, I think is worth keeping around. And I think the Ravens have more cap space than they do after the release of Tony Jefferson and maybe a couple more moves in the secondary coming up, that I think it's worth keeping a guy like that around. And ascending talent that has been consistent with sacks. If we're looking just strictly at numbers, has been consistent throughout his career and hasn't hit double digits yet. But I mean, I think if you look at the tape, I think he was, there have probably been a couple half sacks or a couple plays that you probably could have said he had 10 or 10 and a half sacks this year.
Well, and my opinion will probably change as I'm going back and reviewing the Ravens film, but here's my thing. One way or another, if you re-sign Matt Judon, good. If you don't re-sign Matt Judon, you need to get an outside backer. You need to prioritize the defense. I don't know how much more, Joe, I need to say this, and I'm going to get on my soapbox here, and I'm going to make this case, because Mike Preston of the Baltimore Sun had an excellent column about this earlier in the week. It's time to reinvest in the defense. You invested so much in the offense. I'm not saying not invest in the offense, but the main focus needs to be the defense. If you re-sign Matt Judon, that's great. That can't be the only move you make in free agency with the defense. You have to go get linebackers. You have to go get another pass rusher. Same thing with the draft. You have to get the blue chippers on the defense. You neglected the defense, and in a game when you needed it the most in the playoffs, it couldn't step up and it couldn't make the plays. You can't let that happen again. So the Ravens need to reinvest in the defense, or you know what? Mike Preston's right. If you haven't read the column, the headline basically says if they don't reinvest in the defense and fix it to match the offense, you are going to have the same story next year that you had this year and the year prior. They have to invest in the defense. So if you sign Matt Judon, great. But don't sit there and think that's the only move you can make. Now, you don't have to go sign another pass rusher if you re-sign Matt Judon, but you might want to go draft one in the second round or maybe the first round if you can't get an inside linebacker. But, Joe, in my opinion, you got to make the moves on defense. This has to be a defensive offseason, or you're going to be in trouble because you don't have a very good defense. You have an average at best defense that will do enough in the regular season to win games, but against good offenses in the postseason is going to do what it's done the last 2 years.
Yeah, let's give credit where credit's due that the Ravens were able to revamp their defense to a point where they will still be able to be competitive, but it got to that point where we questioned about, okay, it's great to revamp it. It's great to get those guys midway through the season, but when is the breaking point for this defense? When does it get to the point where it's too much and what they've done just can't get it done? And we saw it in the playoffs. That's really what happened. So the Ravens have an opportunity to kind of revamp the defense again in a little more permanent status than just signing guys off the streets to one-year deals. I look just at their draft position at pick number 28, and if you're really going for one of those blue chip pass rushers, I mean, he's gone by pick 15. I mean, or they're usually top 10 pick. So to me, if you can't get one of those guys in the first half of the round, the Ravens, I mean, I don't believe would trade up that much, give up that much draft capital. Odds are, I think they probably trade out of the 28th pick when it comes down to it. So maybe you target another Jalen Ferguson type guy in the second or third round. There is some mid-round talent that they'd be able to get. I think it's just one of those things where we could see them targeting more of an inside linebacker maybe. There's some inside linebackers that make more sense at the end of round one than maybe a pass rusher, in my opinion. Like I said, I haven't dipped too much into the draft stuff yet, but that's kind of what I've seen is what the Mel Kipers and Todd McShays of the world are projecting right now for the Ravens there. So, yeah, I agree that this is going to be a huge offseason for the Ravens defensively, and I think they know that. They have a lot invested to the offense right now, a lot of guys up through contract, and there are still some positions that they could address on that side of the ball, but when you're talking about the majority of cap space being contributed to, I definitely agree it's on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it's just the sort of thing. You've built a Super Bowl caliber offense. We're not denying that. Now you need a defense to match it, because how many times did we watch where the defense – I mean, the greatest example to me was that Jet game, that Thursday night game a couple late in the year, where the Jets were really moving at will, and the offense had to keep scoring or that was going to be a potential upset. Like, how, if you're a Raven fan, did you not watch that and go, wow, okay, all the credit to Eric DeCosta for plugging the holes, but every hole he plugged, another sprung a leak. Your linebacking group is atrocious. I mean, not to be rude, but it isn't what we're accustomed to in Baltimore. It's not a Super Bowl caliber linebacking group. It's not even a division winning caliber linebacking group. You have to reinvest in it. You have to get some talent. So I see the people like, oh, they should take a receiver at 28. No, no, no. This is, I'm sorry. You did that last year. You gotta help the defense out. I don't want to watch a game where I feel like the offense has to score 40 points to win a 48-45 type of game. That isn't this Raven team. That never has been. I don't want to watch that, Joe. So you have to invest in the defense if you're going to win a Super Bowl. Because look, even the Kansas City Chiefs, who we all bashed all year for not having a defense, had a defense that at the end of the year made enough plays for them to win a Super Bowl on a day when Patrick Mahomes didn't have his best. If the Ravens had a defense like that, maybe they'd have beaten Tennessee knowing that Lamar Jackson had a bad day.
Yeah, my guy Ryan Kerrigan, since this was before last season, but since 2014, was second in league in sacks behind Von Miller. So 31-year-old guy is 11.5 million cap hit for the Redskins next year. Scheduled to be a free agent in 2021. So I think that is a very interesting guy to keep an eye on, and the guy I'm pounding the table for the Ravens right now, because I think he just makes a lot of sense. But just in terms of pass rush, as the Ravens will go up against the Patrick Mahomes of the world, who are looking like your next Patriots dynasty in the AFC, you've got to be able to get to the quarterback. This offense can be as dynamic as it is with Lamar Jackson, but if you can't stop the other team from scoring points, I just don't know if this offense is at a point where they can win track meets right now. I don't think that's just where they're at, especially if they're going to focus heavily on the run game. So it's one of those things where they need to invest in the pass rush. It's a glaring need. To me, it's the biggest need. I know you can make an argument for inside linebacker, and I know you have before, but to me, the pass rush is huge in the NFL that continues to be more predicated on the pass. I know the Ravens went completely against it and ran the ball over 200 yards a game, but you've got to get to the quarterback. It's just, and you can only do it so much through these defensive schemes where it catches up to you. And the Ravens just need to invest into a position that's such a big need, in my opinion.
I agree. And I lump inside linebacker and pass rush basically as the linebacking group as a whole, because that's really where the Ravens get so much of their pass rush is with their outside linebackers. So you just need to redo the linebacking group as a whole. I would not be surprised if 3/4 of the linebacking group for the Ravens is brand new next year, just because they have to reinvest in it. I want to ask this question. Nigel Bradham is listed by Spotrac.com as an outside linebacker. He was cut. Really, they didn't pick up his option in Philadelphia. 30 years old. What are your thoughts on Bradham?
It's going to be another veteran guy that the Ravens would be going after. I mean, it makes sense. He'd be a guy that you could go after that technically, if I'm not mistaken, wouldn't count against compensatory if he's getting cut. And the Ravens are signing him. So I don't know too much about Nigel Brown, to be honest. I don't want to act like I do, but I mean, he would be an interesting guy that the Ravens could go after. But if you're looking, I think he really is more of kind of an inside linebacker than
Right.
outside linebacker. I'm not really sure why Spot Track has him listed as an outside linebacker, because he is more of that middle of the line guy, and could, I think, be a guy that the Ravens could potentially look at maybe once we talk about the inside linebackers. But as far as any pass rush production, I don't think that's there. Maybe a guy that you could target in the middle, but the Ravens, like you said, we will get to it, but they have essentially LJ Fort in their inside linebacker crew next year. I mean, Josh Vine's a free agent, Patrick Owasso is a free agent, yeah. But looking at this outside linebacker group, I just don't see the Kleineys of the world coming to Baltimore. I'd be very surprised if that ends up being the case, just for how much it probably is going to cost, and he's going to want his money.
Well, yeah.
So I mean, that to me just doesn't make any sense for the Ravens, because you still need money left over to sign your draft class. You need to carry money over into the season for different things. So just to me, I think they're going to be more conscious of it, and I think we as fans always like to speculate. And speculation is great. I love speculating on what's going to happen because we don't know what's going to happen. It's just fun to think about what could. But when we start talking about every single top tier free agent, we have to realize that not every free agent wants to come to Baltimore. And when it comes down to it, guys want their money. Like, you want to play for a contender, that's great. A lot of people do, but a lot of people want to get paid. And the Ravens are going to be throwing out $100 million contracts. They just don't have the ability to do it. And when it comes down to it, you have to be realistic in expectations of what the Ravens are going to go after. And if you're looking for a top tier guy on one of the ascending talents, you got him on your team. And I think that's a guy that you target rather than going after a bigger guy. Maybe potentially in a trade, but it's just, to me, if you're going to get better in the pass rush, I just don't see like you getting ready. Like, how do you get better in the pass rush by getting rid of your best pass rusher? To me, like, you keep Matthew Judon and then try to add around him, in my opinion.
I agree, but in the same notion, if you don't keep Judon, which again, if there's a price gap, you can't do like last year where you let C.J. Mosley and Zadarius Smith go and you didn't replace it. So if you're going to spend the money, I agree with you. Spend it on the guy you got. Like, he's there, you know him, spend the money on him. If you're not going to spend the money on Judon, you're going to have to spend it anyway. So the logic is a little off, and I hope Eric DeCosta, look, if it comes to Judon wants $20 million a year, he can see the door stage left. I'm fine with that. But make an effort to keep the guy. And if he leaves because he's going to get a huge payday, fine. But no, okay, you're going to have to go spend it. You're going to have to go fill his spot. And you're probably going to have to do it in free agency because, like you said, not a great top tier, a loaded draft class for the edge rushers and your pass rushers. So you're going to have to invest in it in free agency anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens have the ability to, the perfect kind of like purgatory for this is signing him and placing a franchise tag on him. And obviously Judon has his leverage where he could say, I don't want to play under the franchise tag until maybe I sign a deal or I want to play somewhere else. So there is definitely some negotiations in there. But it's a 1-year deal, and I have a hard time believing Matthew Judon would turn down that money. I get players want to bet on themselves, but this is around $15 or $16 million you can be playing. And this is not a former first-round pick. This is a former fifth-round pick. So the John Eisenberg, Ryan Macon, Garrett Downing talked about it on the Lounge podcast, and I completely agree with them saying that I don't think he's a guy that would turn down that kind of money. But there are a lot of options the Ravens can go forward once they tag him, and we've seen in the past where guys have been tagged and traded. Jadeveon Clowney did it from the Texans to the Seahawks. Then you start speculating what they could potentially get for him, but that's here nor there. The Ravens first need to just tag him, and I think that just makes the most sense. I really just don't see a situation where they don't tag him. It wouldn't make any sense to me if they didn't tag him because then you still have time to work out a deal, and if you do need to trade him, at least you're getting some kind of assets for him. I just worry then if that were the case, like what you get in return and what is going to be there for you. But the Ravens don't have – they have a lot of impending free agents, but they don't have those – they don't have like multiple big free agents. One of the big ones was Marcus Peters that you already resigned. Last year it was C.J. Mosley, who you know was going to get paid. Then it was Zadarius Smith, who you knew was going to get a huge contract. Really, it's just Matthew Judon. And the Ravens have been pretty reluctant to use the franchise tag, but I think in this case, it's worth it. I think you definitely use it. They've only used it, I think, 2 or 3 times since 2010. But on Haloti Ngata, Ray Rice, and Justin Tucker, if I'm not mistaken. So to me, this is a big enough need where you have to do it. It just makes no sense not to. If you ask anyone that's in tune with the Ravens or know what's going on with them, I just don't see why you wouldn't franchise tag them.
Well, we got an opportunity to ask somebody in tune with the Ravens next week, Joe. Why don't you tease that one out?
Yes, we're going to have on ESPN's Jamison Hensley for a little bit. They actually just finished up a big conference call with ESPN's Mel Kiper. So we'll be excited to ask him about that and ask him what he thinks what's going to be happening for the Ravens this year. In this offseason. But we'll wrap things up with this episode of the Ravens Brawl podcast. We will be back next week with Jamison and also previewing the inside linebacker free agent group. We touched on a little bit, but this is going to be a big offseason for the Ravens at that position too, and there's going to be a lot to talk about. So for Joe Schiller, or for Dave Steinwaddle, sorry, I got confused. For Dave Steinwaddle, I'm Joe Schiller. We will talk to you guys next week. Have a good weekend. All right.
All right, man.